to another edition of the Founders Podcast with me, Zena, and
Sabrina.
This is episode 5. I can't believe we're at episode 5 already.
So
time flies.
I couldn't even remember that it was episode 5.
Right. Time flies when you're having fun, clearly. Today we wanted to talk about a film that has been Oscar nominated, or a performance within a film that's been Oscar nominated, and some of the conversation that has evolved around the main character that has been focused on this film. The film we're talking about is King Richard. So if you've seen that film, we'll be interested to hear your comments in terms of what you thought of the film and if you think it is Oscar worthy in terms of performance. Sabrina, what's your thoughts in terms of the film and some of the conversations that we're hearing around the film? I know you have a particular perspective on it.
For full disclosure, I have not seen King Richard yet. The reason why I wanted to have this, King Richard the film, the reason why I wanted to have this conversation was because the noise around a film dedicated to the father of Venus and Serena Williams, and why that choice made, in particular, white feminists angry at the majority. There was also, I think, remember Amanda Seales also siding with the majority in that why wasn't the focus or the subject matter Venus and Serena rather than their father? So I do have some strong views about that, because I do think that along with the conversation that it started, there is something in there about culture and an understanding of culture and when to step in or not step in conversations that don't really pertain to you, and acknowledge certain stories, whether you agree or disagree, need to be told. So that's the perspective I'm going to come from in this conversation.
Okay, I'm here for it. I'd love to hear more about it. So what memo do you think they missed?
So I don't think they missed a memo. I think they were triggered about the fact that this story is not about women. And typically in the feminist guise, there is this back and forth exchange about the role of women and the role of gender. But actually, with Venus and Serena's father, it is very much about him and his love of the women in his life. Whether you've seen the movie or not, if you know anything about the man and the siblings, he doesn't just have 2 daughters, he's raised children. He was very much engaged in the lives of his children. And within the Black community in particular, we honor our mothers and fathers. That is what we do in our community. So it's not out of the ordinary that there would be a movie dedicated to a man that's contributed and shaped essentially not only Venus and Serena's careers, but all of his children. That's not out of step with Black culture. That is out of step with mainstream culture. And this is where understanding needs to be of when you step in and when you fall back from conversations that don't concern you.
That's clearly stated. If you see the movie, I think exactly what you said is kind of hard to believe that someone could have seen the movie and still be standing by that viewpoint, because you then get even if you didn't know his story, you get more of a context in terms of the impacts that he's had on these girls' lives, as you said, now women's lives, and the rest of the family, and the sacrifices that he made in order to make that possible. So I think, to your point, we're so accustomed to the Black male being portrayed in a certain way in mainstream media that this archetype is just creates dissonance with a certain audience. So I'd be interested to see what happens when we go to Oscar season with this film.
Yeah, and I think what was really unfortunate last year, because these conversations really started around last year, around maybe October, November time. Clearly, if Venus and Serena had a problem with how this movie was done and how their father was portrayed, number one, they wouldn't have endorsed it. They wouldn't have put their name on it. They wouldn't have invested in their time. It's not like Serena and Venus don't have anything else to do with their time. I mean, these women have a lot going on, are very influential, and actually they probably would have shut it down. They would have the power to shut it down if they didn't feel that this was an accurate reflection of their father. I think the second thing, and one of the things that I pay very close attention to, just because I have a bias to it, is that you don't need to honor someone because they're perfect. Their father is not a perfect man. He's a very complex and nuanced individual. And sometimes I think people struggle with the idea of acknowledging and celebrating imperfection, particularly when it's seen in the guise of the Black male. So there's two extremes of Black men. Either there is the criminal, the gangster, there's something else going on, or there's the ultra corporate, conservative, athlete, entertainer kind of individual. There is never anything in the middle of that spectrum. So when we get exposed to that and all of its humanity, we can't really, and I say we because some Black people struggle with this, can't really recognize the humanity and the imperfection in a Black man that is, on the one hand, a very dedicated and engaged father, sacrificing to make sure that all of his children gets the American dream, but at the same time isn't a perfect person and can still be celebrated in his imperfection. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. There's always these extremes, so you don't allow people to be live in the whole humanity of themselves. They have to be role models or stereotypes, and that takes humanity away from the individual. So what I'm interested to hear, what do you think can be done essentially to sort of change this narrative? Do you think the narrative is changing, or do you think
that is what can be done? that's why we're here.
I guess that was a leading question.
You gave me the alley-oop. I'm gonna slam dunk it.
That's why we're in a partnership.
And all jokes aside, apart from the reason why Niche on Demand exists, is we have to tell stories. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie did a TED Talk that went completely viral about the dangers of single stories. There are singular stories when it comes to the Black community. We're very rich, we're very diverse. Some of us very conservative, others not so much. And in order for people to normalize the differences, there needs to be more storytelling. Storytelling also by people with authentic voices and lived experiences. And I'm not, again, a proponent of somebody, you must be Black and have a particular perspective to write. No, but there needs to be a recognition of when an authentic voice and a lived experience needs to be around the table. And I think when it comes to biopics like King Richard, that's needed. He's not a fictional character. The man's still living, alive. And I also respect the fact that he did what he needed to do, and he's fall back. We don't see the man. We don't see him at all. The only reason he's even in conversation is because there was a movie about him. He's not trying to capitalize off of his children. He's done what he's needed to do as their guardian, and now he's enjoying, as well as they're enjoying, the fruits of everyone's labor. What do you think in terms of what needs to change the narrative?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think, like you said, it's obvious that's the reason why we exist. Was to be part of that movement. I think having these types of conversations candidly to challenge some of the conversations that are out in the mainstream, and because people have access to platforms, their voice becomes louder than other perspectives as well. So I think two things: having conversations and supporting more organizations like Niche on Demand and others who are investing in creatives to be able to be empowered to tell stories from perspectives that we haven't traditionally seen. I do also know that Mr. Williams isn't currently well. So I know that that's part of the reason why he isn't in the limelight. But I think, to your point, it's very clear from the movie that he set a goal, he went out and he achieved that goal, and the fruits of his labor are evident. full stop, drop the mic, walk away, end of story. So what could be better than to celebrate the person who made this all possible by dedicating a film to him? Like you said, in our community, that's not that far stretched. So, like I said, I've tried, but I can't say it better than you, Sabrina. You've made the point.
I have a question, controversial. So do you think if King Richard was made outside of the US, that it would have gotten the same amount of critique and noise around why it was King Richard and not Venus and Serena?
That's a pause for thought. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a really good question. I'd be interested to hear what the listeners think. Instinctively, I don't think it would have got as much attention from that perspective. And I don't know enough to make this claim, but I'm wondering if it's something to do with the idea of what the Black man represents in America, as to why there was such pushback on the narrative being told from his perspective.
Yeah, I don't think if this was a movie about two British tennis players or two Caribbean or African tennis players, that people in the UK, in the Caribbean, or in Africa would have said, why are you making a movie about your dad? I don't think that would be the case. I think that is very specific to a movement that is very unique and specific to the US. But that's just my thought.
Interesting.
I don't think that would have been the case, but I am very interested in what people think about that, if there would have been the same level of scrutiny as to why a movie is dedicated to the father, as if Serena and Venus don't have enough life to live and we'll have biopics upon biopics about them over. I mean, if we look at Serena, she could have a biopic on her when she was a teenager, in her 20s, before marriage, children. I mean, her story is still evolving. There will be movies about her, about Venus, what Venus has done, especially in interior design, fashion. I mean, there's a lot going on with these two. And
it's
two.
It's not over. It's not over.
It's these two, but they have siblings. People are accomplished, okay, in the Williams family. So we just happen to know these two women because of what their father did. So
they could have something in 20 years' time that, you know, people who aren't even born yet now will be watching. Right. So
freaky. I mean, why would you? They're in their 30s. So Serena's in her 30s. Venus is, I think, she early 40s. She might be early 40s.
I'm not sure.
It's too soon.
Yeah.
Like, unless they're doing it on their like formative years, it's just too soon. I think, for something like that. More life to live.
I have to agree.
More life.
So I think we'll leave it there on that one. I think we'd love to hear what you have to say. Do you agree that the perspective that the biopic should have been made about the Williams sisters isn't valid based on what we've shared with you today? Do you think there is credence to that argument? What do you think we need to do as an industry in order to make or normalize characters like Richard Williams being the center or central character of stories, and not putting emphasis on individuals having to be a perfect personification of a negative stereotype or a positive stereotype to validate their role as the main character in a movie? On that note, Sabrina, any closing thoughts?
Go and watch King Richard. I'm going to watch it. I want to see more stories like this. And so the more you watch and consume, the more it builds a business justification, a monetary reason as to why more biopics should be made. So go and watch it. I'm gonna watch it. I haven't seen it yet. In my mind, I was thinking, who would be the next like King Richard? I'm like, oh, they're gonna make a movie about Matthew Knowles. That would be very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very interesting. If that were to, you could do the whole thing about a Knowles family. You can make it from his perspective. You can make it from Tina's perspective, and of course, then Beyonce and Solange, because everybody in that family can have a movie made about them. But go and support, because that is what drives content. Is the last thing I have to say about that. And the more we engage and consume and support, the more stuff gets made. What about you?
I second that. Until next time, see you all soon.
See you later.